Hey everyone, thanks for joining me again this week. Today we are starting a new series called Teach Steve, and my first guest who's going to be teaching me tonight is Ryan Chandler, who's going to be teaching me some Rust. So thanks for joining me, Ryan. How are you doing?
No, thank you for having me on again. How are you?
Yeah, I'm really good. Looking forward to learning
Good.
some Rust, if I'm honest.
Yeah, no, great. It's one of my favorite languages, I'd say, and any excuse to use it, I will take up the opportunity. So
Definitely. So
yeah,
there
let's do it.
is a GitHub repo already, so I'm just going to post that in the chat so people can find it. Um, there we go. Let's move it into a nice position. There we go. So, where do we start?
Well, I think you've already got the repo open
We've
in
got the
VS
repo
Code.
open, yeah. So I've got VS Code
Yes.
because I don't know what you're meant to use for like an IDE, so I went with VS
Yeah.
Code. And
Yeah, VS Code is probably a perfectly fine tool. I think you can also use CLine from JetBrains,
cool,
or even PHP Storm if you install the Rust language support. Um,
nice,
but VS Code is the simplest way to go.
awesome.
Yeah.
Ah, my wife has joined us. Hey, Amy. I'm a bit
Hello.
rusty. So I wanted to actually just give a quick shout out and thank you to Tuple for getting me a license to use a pair programming session, which is allowing me to actually do this a bit more smoothly instead of just you shouting at me, no, not that bit, the other bit. You can actually join me and pair with me and help teach me. It's great.
Yeah, definitely.
So
Cool.
where do I
So where do
start?
we begin?
I've got a repo. I've got
Yep.
my git ignore. I've got an env file which has got a GitHub key in it. Here's an env example. Um,
Yeah.
how do I
So the best
start a
place to
Rust
start
program?
in terminal.
Terminal. Okay,
Yeah. So we'll open up a
I
terminal.
am here.
And Rust comes with sort of a unified tool. You can think of it like Composer. So it's a package management tool. It's also a build tool for Rust, and that's called Cargo. So that's just a command line tool that
Cool.
you tend to install alongside Rust. And similar to Composer, you can run Composer init, which will initialize a new project. And in Cargo's case, you can run Cargo init or you can run Cargo new. In this case, we'll do the init to
Oh,
initialize a new project.
do I need to give it any arguments or just straight
No, you
up
can
in it?
just leave it as it is. Yeah.
Cool.
And if you head over to VS Code now, you should see some new
Ah,
files.
I've got cargo.toml and I've got a source. So what
Yeah.
I'll do,
So
I'm
you've got
going
a
to
source.
step through this. I'll git add, git commit. Cool. We kind of know what
Sweet.
we're doing. Hey Ali, thanks for joining, buddy. So now what?
Cool.
I'll open one of them
So
up, shall I?
yeah, let's dig through the files. So I mean, throughout the stream, I'll make comparisons back to Composer and npm, just because that's probably what we're all familiar with.
Yeah, definitely.
So both Composer and npm use JSON as their configuration language, which makes sense. It's very simple. It's very easy to use. In Rust's case, it actually uses TOML, which at first glance is very similar to YAML. There's
Yeah.
no quotes around keys and stuff like that. Um, just
But it's
like
really readable,
Composer, you
right?
have a name. Yeah, exactly. It's super readable. Yeah. Um, very clear, very straightforward. You don't have like unlimited nesting of objects like you do in JSON.
Yeah.
You have sort of arrays and sections, if you like.
Okay.
So this is the configuration file. We won't touch this right away. We can just leave this as it is.
Awesome.
And then in source, you have a main.rs file. And this is, the most basic Rust program you can write. This is the hello world of Rust.
Awesome.
So in a terminal, I think you already had one open.
Yep.
To run the project, all you need to do is cargo run.
Awesome.
and you just run your
Compiles.
first Rust program. Yeah,
Hey.
exactly. So
Right.
Cargo is a general purpose tool for Rust. It's the
Yep.
package manager. It's the build tool. So from the output there, you can see that it's compiled our Rust program in a debug mode. So it's not going to be super optimized code,
Yep.
but it will be fast enough for testing, and it also executes at the very end.
Awesome. That's
There you go.
relatively simple, right? I mean,
Yeah,
having used Golang before, which is a kind of a similar-ish language, I suppose, you've got to provide a lot more arguments and stuff to build and run it. So it's nice that it just kind of understands what it needs to do. It's just like
yeah, exactly.
off we
Yeah,
go.
it's a very specialized tool for a
Yeah,
specific use case.
definitely. Hey, everyone joining
Cool.
us. Um,
Yeah, hey guys.
Chathura, Michael, and Nathan, and Ali. Yes, I will be continuing the Laravel DDD. I'm just doing a break to do some Teach Steve to get some more interesting stuff done for a little bit and just get a bit of variation. So, we've got that running.
Cool.
We can go back to here. We can see target.
Yep. So target is kind of like the vendor directory or the node modules folder.
Okay.
It's normally going to be get ignored.
Yep.
It's where
So
Rust
I
or
need to
Cargo
add
outputs
that
all
to
of
my
your
git
build
ignore, right?
files.
Ah, added by cargo. Perfect.
If it hasn't already updated it, yeah, there we go.
Yeah.
Cool. Perfect.
So we can just commit that and just say, what was it? Cargo run.
Yep. Cargo run. Yep. So it has a lock file,
Awesome.
just like npm, just like Composer,
Nice and simple, right?
and that just locks. Yeah, nice and simple, very simple. So why don't we? Did we mention what we were going to be building?
No, I'll mention that now actually. So if you couldn't guess from the name of the repo, it's going to be a GitHub CLI application. So the idea is it's going to cover a few key bases. As one of the things I said to Ryan was I want to be able to cover a few key things to give a good insight into different aspects of Rust. So we're going to build a CLI program which will take a command line argument as a GitHub username. It will then fetch using environment variables. It will build the GitHub client. It will use the API to fetch a list of repos, and then it'll output those into the console. So it's a bit of a benchmarking thing, really. I mean, in PHP, I'd know how to do this. In Node, I know how to do this. In Rust, let's use it as a comparison, see how easy it is to achieve. And obviously, there's going to be different performance benefits using something like Rust, of course, but it's more that developer experience of actually doing that, I suppose.
Yeah, cool.
So, how do we
I
start?
think yeah, so we'll do this in two steps if we have enough time. The first step
Yep,
we'll roll the CLI ourselves, like fetching arguments from the environment and stuff like that. We'll roll that
yep,
ourselves, and then towards the end, maybe we'll take a step back and we'll say, well, actually, there's probably a package that can make this a little bit nicer, and we'll refactor to use that package.
yeah, sounds perfect.
Yeah, cool. So assuming we need to get input from the user, we probably want to do something, say the package or the command line tool is GitHub CLI Rust. We presumably want to be able to run that and say GitHub CLI Rust and then give a username.
Yep,
That's
exactly that.
probably how we want it to work. Cool. So just like you would in PHP, where you have like the global argv array,
Yep,
there's a very similar thing in Rust, and we're going to need to import the package or the function from the standard library.
okay,
And we're also going to have to look at invoking functions and iterators.
awesome.
So in PHP, to import a class or a function, you would say use and then the name of the function.
Yep,
Rust is no different. It all
cool.
begins with a use keyword. And this is the standard library. So the top level namespace, if you like, is going to be std. So standard. And submodules are separated by 2 colons. So in this case, we're saying we want to use standard, and now we're going to dig a little bit deeper, and pull out a sub package.
Cool.
Arguments will come from the env module.
Yep.
And you can just put a semicolon at the end. So what this is doing, this is going to import the entirety of the env module. And it will store that underneath or inside of an env variable.
So now if I ran that again, just to see. Yep. Unused imports is fine. But because I know with like Golang, exactly. For example, I've got to do a go get.
Yeah, so this is the standard library. So this comes out of the box with the Rust compiler. It will link this library at compile time. I think another comparison with Go doesn't let you have unused variables and stuff.
Yeah.
Whereas Rust, you can leave them and the compiler will optimize those out.
Awesome.
Cool. So why don't we call a function?
Yep.
So at the very top of the main function,
okay,
just inside. So we'll go somewhere around here. Yeah. We can create a variable called args, perhaps.
Okay. And how do you use variables? Is it let?
Yeah, it's let.
I thought I'd
remembered a little bit
something.
like JavaScript.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we've got let, and then the name of the variable, which is going to be args, equals. So we'll assign a value to this. And we want to call a function inside of the env module. So we'll do env, 2 colons, because now we're digging further into that submodule. And these are all of the public functions and structs and types available in that module.
Nice.
In our case, we just want the args one. Yeah, perfect. In your Rust extension is actually sort of like giving you inline type hints, similar to how your PHP storm works.
So I can, if I, is that going to complain?
It will complain because you haven't actually specified the right type. Args here is like shortened; it's taken off the module at the very beginning. If you wanted to type hint this yourself, you could put the colon back in, and this struct is actually inside of env. So you'd need to do env double colon and then args. There you go, nice. Just like that. So that's how typing looks.
I mean, if it's what I would do in PHP, it's what I do in other languages. So I'd like to keep it consistent.
Let's do it. Yeah. So Rust does have fairly decent type inference. So it can deduce your types at compile time. In a lot of cases, there are some cases with generics and stuff like that are a bit harder for Rust to understand fully.
Yeah.
We're not going to get too deep into generics today. We will use them a little bit, but cool. So we've got args, and let's just dump these args out into the terminal.
Okay.
So Rust has a thing called a macro.
Okay.
Which is kind of like a function. It behaves like a function. You can invoke them and you pass arguments to them. But at compile time, Rust actually expands those macros into code, similar to C and C++, if you've ever seen that before. So you're not actually invoking something. You're just saying, anytime you run into this macro, replace it with a chunk of code at compile time. And the overhead is like minimal. So in our case, on this line, yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's nice. On this line, we're going to do dbg, and that's just short for debug. And you can see VS Code's trying to auto-complete that for you. All macros end with a bang or an exclamation mark.
Okay.
And that's how Rust figures out the difference between a function call, a function invocation, and a macro one. So we can call this just like a function, like we would in any other language, with 2 brackets or parentheses, pass through args, and whack a semicolon at the end. And now if we try to execute this in the terminal, so we can just do cargo run.
Cool. So unused args, that must be used.
Yeah.
Some notes about how I'm using the language, I assume.
Yep. Yeah, that's another thing with Rust. So like I said, cargo is like an all-in-one tool for Rust. You've got build, package management,
Yeah.
but it also does like linting as well
Awesome.
out of the box.
What more
It
could
can
you
tell
ask
you how
for?
to improve your code. It can tell you how to make it
Yeah.
potentially faster,
Amazing.
which is
So we
pretty
can
cool.
see we've got a args being well, dumped out here.
Yeah.
Um, inner. What's inner about?
So we type hinted args as an instance, if you like, of the args
Yeah.
structure. So what debug does, or dbg, is similar to var dump or print r in PHP.
Yeah.
It just dumps out the entire structure of a
Okay.
variable or a
Yeah.
data type. So you
Cool.
don't really have to worry about what inner is. But from the syntax, you can kind of see that we've got these square braces, or square brackets, sorry. So you can kind of assume this isn't an array-like structure,
Yeah.
just like it is in any language, and that is the case. Um, if you execute cargo run again, um, and just after the run, do 2 hyphens. So this is going to split out any of the arguments and flags to cargo from the arguments and flags that we want to send through to our program.
Yeah. Is that it?
And
Just
just
two
after,
hyphens?
yep, 2 hyphens, and just after, with a space, maybe put in your GitHub username or my GitHub username.
Cool. Yours is Ryan J. Chandler, right?
GJ, almost.
Oh.
Yep. Yeah, so if you run that now,
Oh, nice.
our our new argument ends up in the dump.
Awesome.
Yeah, progress.
Quite simple, right?
Yeah, it's fairly simple. I've personally found Rust to be simpler coming from a PHP background, given that the syntax is so similar in a
Yeah.
lot of ways.
Awesome.
Cool. So, the reason we've dumped this out to begin with is so that we can see what's being passed to our program as an
Yeah.
argument. We've got 2 arguments being passed. The first is the path to the binary that's being executed, and the second argument, or index 1, is the argument that we've provided ourselves.
Okay.
That's the only one we're interested in.
Definitely.
So we can discard the first one, try and grab the second one and store it in a variable.
Okay.
Now, I'm going to see if you can maybe figure out how this works.
Oh. This'll be fun.
If I give you a hint
Yep.
on structures, you can call methods on those structures with a dot, just like JavaScript. So you can do args dot and then call it a method.
So, what have we got?
Yeah, you can just cycle through all of the
Find,
methods.
flatten. Well, for this one, I could probably just call last because I've only got one argument, but it might not be the one I'm looking for. I think
Exactly,
maybe,
yeah. So you might want to future proof it a little bit.
yeah, that's what I'm thinking. I want to get the specific, not just get the last on the chain, right?
Exactly, yeah.
Count, cycle, filter,
I'll
find.
give you a hint. You need to scroll down a little bit further.
Ooh, okay.
There's a lot of methods.
Yeah, there is nth, I'm assuming.
Yep,
Nth
perfect.
one.
Yeah, exactly, yeah, because it's 0 indexed.
Ooh, is that gonna?
So if you hover over, you'll be able to see what the error is. So cannot borrow args as mutable, as it is not declared as mutable.
Okay.
Now, this is where lower level languages such as Rust start to get a bit confusing if you're only ever stuck in PHP land or JavaScript land.
Yep.
PHP, everything is mutable near enough, apart from read-only properties these days. Everything is mutable. Now, in Rust, it's such a safe language that it says by default you can declare a variable and never change its value. right? We want you to be super safe. You have to explicitly know what is changeable.
Yep.
So to declare a variable as mutable, instead of just saying let, we actually need to say let mut or mut.
So let mutate basically.
Exactly, yeah. Let someone mutate args. The reason we needed to do this is if you hover over the nth method,
Yeah.
it should give you a little. Yep, that's it. So you've got fn nth or function nth expects a mutable self. So it expects args to be mutable.
Yep.
In the background, it's going to basically skip over any other args, which is exactly why it needs to be mutable. You can't skip over something if it's not mutable.
Yeah. Awesome.
So we'll run this again
Yeah.
in the terminal. We'll do this step by step, so we can see the output at each point. So now we get a sum value.
Yep.
Rust, again, this is the difference between a lot of low-level languages and dynamic languages. Rust doesn't have a concept of null. There is no, I mean, there is, but technically there's no null value. Instead, what it has is an option type. And all an option type is an enumeration that can hold a value, and it's either none or sum. So you either say this value is either going to exist in some form, or it's going to equal none. And if it equals none, you can think of that as if it being null or non-existent.
Yeah.
A unit type or an empty value. In this case, we've passed an argument, so we can see it as a sum, and inside it's holding our little string from the
So,
command.
for example, if I change that to a 2, then I'd
Yep,
expect none to come back.
none.
Because
Yeah,
the
exactly,
index
because
doesn't
we've not
exist,
provided
basically.
anything. Yeah,
Awesome.
so it's a safety feature.
Yeah.
In PHP, if you access an index that doesn't exist in the array, it will throw an error.
Yeah.
Undefined index 2. In Rust land, it's going to say this value doesn't exist, and you explicitly have to handle that case.
Okay.
Again, it all comes back down to the safety of Rust.
Yeah.
So let's actually store our argument in a variable.
Yep, let's do it. So let me see if I can guess this one. So we'll
Yeah,
do
go for
something
it.
like call it handle.
Yep.
If I just grab that.
Yep.
And then if we just replace that with handle. And this is an option
Cool.
string.
Yeah, but if you think about it, we actually want the string that's inside of the option. So maybe you can figure that out again if you do a dot at the end of the nth.
Yeah, let's do it that way.
So again, these are all the methods on an option.
Okay, so
If I can give you a hint,
yep.
the hint would be the option wraps a value. So to get the value, you need to unwrap it. Yeah, there we go.
Hey, look at me. I'm all grown up.
Yeah, you're a Rust lord now.
I am. So now I should
Cool.
just get a string output. And I do.
Yeah, exactly.
Amazing.
So we've retrieved that. Now we spoke about error handling a little bit.
Yep.
If you change that to nth2, or maybe you don't provide an argument at position 1.
Let's try that.
It panics.
It can't unwrap
Exactly.
nothing.
Yeah, it can't give you a value if it isn't holding a value. And this is kind of where Rust goes, well, we're giving you the safety, You've got the safety net there. You know you're unwrapping it. You should really be handling the none case
Yeah.
explicitly.
So is this a little bit like Go, where you do if not equals null or something?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah. In Go, you would normally either return multiple values from a function, and you might return like an underscore and an err, an error, and yeah, like you
Yeah.
say, you would check error is not equal to nil. It's exactly the same sort of thing.
Okay.
In this case, we need to handle that. Um, PHP has a match expression.
Yeah.
Rust has exactly the same thing.
Okay.
So or just after the equal sign, we can do it inline since it's an expression.
Excellent.
Just after the equal sign, we'll put match. And you can leave the parentheses out. Rust doesn't have parentheses around its if statements, its match expressions.
Yeah.
Just at the end, so like just over here, we can put curly braces.
So I can drop that.
Yep. And put a semicolon at the end of that statement. Rust is very smart. If you hover over the args.env.unwrap, it will tell you a little bit further down in that pop-up window, probably right near the bottom. It will tell you what the error. It will say non-exhaustive patterns. Type standard string is empty. The same is true in PHP, kind of. A match expression has to cover all possible patterns of a value. In PHP, if you don't put a default at the end of a match expression, it will error out and it will say missing case or whatever it says, whatever the error is. Rust, to even compile the code, it needs all of the possible matches or a wildcard or a default case.
Okay.
So on a new line, we know an option is either sum or none. So our first case is going to be the sum value. So if you just type in sum, you can see it sort of put these parentheses in for you as if sum is a function.
Yeah.
Rust's pattern matching is a lot more powerful than PHP's. In PHP, with a match, it's either like an arbitrary value. You can't say, does this object match class of type X and does it have property of type Y?
Yeah.
Not very easily, anyway. In Rust, you can break down these patterns massively and actually say, if it's a sum, I know it's going to hold a value. So inside of these curly braces, just here, you can just type a variable name.
Okay.
We'll call it H. And when Rust runs this match expression, it's going to see that you've put the H there, and the value that is inside of the sum is going to be stored inside of H.
Awesome.
So it creates a variable for you inline for this expression. Now, after the pattern, you need a chunky arrow or a double arrow. Yep, just like PHP.
Yep.
And you need to return a value. So our sum is going to store the value inside a variable called H. So you can just put H as the return value.
Do I need to actually say return or?
No, it's implicit.
Awesome.
So that's the sum case. We also need the none case.
Yeah.
So in the scenario, you don't provide a first argument to the function. We can either panic and say, oh no, you haven't given us an argument. Or we can just print out a helpful message like, please provide a GitHub username.
Yeah.
So we'll go with that second one, I think. So you need an arrow. And we need to invoke another macro.
Okay.
So maybe if you just type print. We've got some macros. The one we're interested in is the second one, which is print line. And you can just provide a string. So double quotes and whatever the message you'd like. Maybe please provide a GitHub username. just like that.
Cool.
If we hover over the sum and the none over here just to see what these errors are. What's it? Moaning at
Mismatched
us.
types.
Yeah, so in the match at the very top up here,
Yep.
we're unwrapping the values still.
Yep. So what we want to do is
So what's
unwrap
going
that.
into the match, if you just remove that, because we actually want to send the option into the match instead of the string that we're potentially unwrapping.
Cool.
And just like that, the errors go away.
Magic.
Yeah. We'll just quickly look at this match expression though, because what is actually happening here is we're printing something out, but we're not returning a value. And now Rust doesn't like that because
Yep.
it's not uniform. You're returning a string from one place, but in the other place, you're not returning anything. And really, Rust can't optimize that. So what we probably want to do is print out a line and then exit the program completely.
Okay.
I think that sounds about right.
Definitely. Sounds about right to me.
Yeah. At the very beginning, we can just put a curly brace. Just before the print line, we can put a curly brace. And one at the end. And then this creates a block of code.
Yep.
So we can break this down onto new lines as well, just to make it a little bit
Excellent.
more readable.
Readability.
Yeah, exactly. And at the end, we put a semicolon. We still need to return or exit the
Here, yeah.
program. Yep, just there, and that's it.
Cool.
So in PHP, you would just type exit or die.
Yep.
I think exit's more appropriate. Rust doesn't have a global exit, but if you start typing exit and just hit enter on that top one, and you can see the use statements at the very top have changed. So it now says
Yep.
use standard env, and it also says use process exit. So it's automatically imported that for you. You can whack a semicolon there and change the code to some integer. 0 means success. I'd probably do a 1, just like that. And yeah, we can run the program.
Please provide a GitHub username.
Yep. And then our username is being pulled out of it.
Perfect.
I'd say this is probably commit worthy.
Yeah, I'd definitely say it would be. So.
Have you got any questions so far, or?
No, I mean for me it's making sense, but I mean having used Go, there's some parity between the two. It's just specifics, I suppose.
Yeah.
There you go. Passing in an argument and handling non-passed.
Yeah, that is exactly what we did.
Descriptive.
Yeah. And I think the code speaks for itself as well.
Yeah,
really.
it really does. I mean, it's
expressive.
Mutable args, because does it still need to stay mutable if we're pulling things out of it and not using
it still does.
Args? Okay.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Remember, it's the nth method that needs it to be mutable. Yeah. So as long as we're calling that, it will have to stay mutable.
Cool.
So the next step, I guess, would be actually retrieving some repositories.
Yeah, definitely.
That sounds about right.
Would you go straight to? Would you use something like an SDK for this, or would you use manual HTTP calls? What would you recommend in Rust for something that's only really on one endpoint, for example?
Yeah, if it's just a single endpoint, I'd honestly just go with HTTP calls.
Cool. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to get the REST API docs up.
Yep.
We look for the reference for repositories.
I think there should be one called list repositories.
There is. It's always, there we go, list repositories for a user. Not hard to find. It's hard to find on the
Cool.
docks at times. Cool.
Yeah.
So I just realised everything's in dark mode
um,
at the minute, and I'm sat here in the dark. So let me make sure. Oh, no, GitHub just thinks I want to stay in dark mode, so we'll keep it. Okay.
yeah. So the GitHub API is /users username repo.
I'll copy that to my
I
clipboard so we can remember it.
Yeah, I don't actually think we need an API key to access this. I think it's public.
Good question.
So I think we might be able to skip over the whole environment file stuff.
It is. It is public. Just don't really need it.
Cool. Yeah, I mean that removes a little step.
Yeah.
I imagine there's probably rate limits and stuff if you're not using a key. Maybe if we have time at the end, we can come back and
Yeah, definitely.
set up a
I think
key.
loading environment variables is probably important for
Cool.
this sort of thing, isn't it? So, how do we make a
Yeah.
call? I mean, obviously, I'm assuming at any point I can do like a print line and say like fetching GitHub repos for, is it a plus? What is it in
Not quite,
Rust?
no. So in Rust, you tend to format strings very similar to like a sprintf or a printf in PHP.
Okay.
And the way that works is you basically put empty curly braces inside of a string, and you provide a list of arguments after that. So if you remove
So I
the
need a
plus
comma.
and make it a comma, yep. And what the print line macro will do, it will just go through each of the arguments or each of the curly braces, and it will try and find an argument in that position and replace it with that.
Amazing. So does it need, so just, would they be comma separated if I wanted more than one, or would it have to be like in square braces?
Yep. Yep. Comma separated.
Awesome.
It's just a spread of arguments.
So what I'll do is, we don't need to debug that now.
Yep. We can see that in the terminal.
Perfect. So what I'll do, I'll drop that last one
Just
because
like
I don't
that.
need the hello world in there. Excellent.
Cool. So HTTP requests. Rust is very low level, and although you can, if you really wanted to, you could construct an HTTP client with the Rust standard library. It has TCP utils and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But it's very raw, it's very verbose and low level.
And
So I
might
think
take us a 2 hour stream,
99%,
right?
probably longer. I think if you went to 99% of Rust developers and said, what's the go-to library? They'd say a library called Request.
Okay.
So you can probably head over to Google actually and find the GitHub repo. So it's Request, but instead of a U, it's a W.
Is it by Sean Monster? Monstar?
Yep,
Monstar.
that's the one.
Cool. So
So
what's
I'd
the best
probably
way
say
to
this is
add
the go-to.
this? What's it? Do I need to run a command line like a wooden go line to go get it, or
Nope. Instead, you add the key to your dependencies. So you see there that line where it says
yeah?
dependencies request. Yep. You just take that line, paste
So
that into your
just the
cargo
one, yeah.
.toml file. Yep, just the one. Paste that into there. And now if you run cargo run,
going. I saved it. Is it going to
yep.
automatically pull it in because I've got the analyzer and stuff?
It will still have to build it, but if you open the terminal,
Yep.
and do a cargo run, you'll see cargo goes off and it fetches all of your packages, once Rust Analyzer's done messing with the lock file.
Yeah. Ooh. Should I disable analyzer?
I think it's still doing its thing. Yeah, go for it, yeah.
Let's reload that. Here we go.
Cool. Yeah, so back in the terminal. Try and rerun it. It looks like the process is still doing something. Rust is known for somewhat slow compile times, not as slow as like C++, but
Yeah.
quite slow. If you just give this a little second.
Yeah.
I guess while that's running, actually, we can talk about the dependencies in the cargo.toml file.
Yep. Let's do it.
So, where do we begin? So you have the name of the package, which is on the left-hand side. Over here.
Yep.
And normally, in a lot of cases, you could actually just say package name equals and then a string with the version, just like you would in Composer or NPM.
Yep.
But in this case, we're opening up like an object or a dictionary of more key value pairs.
Okay.
Version does what it says on the tin. It specifies the version.
Yep.
And features is an array of strings. And in Rust,
Okay.
I won't go into too much detail, but when you build a crate or a program in Rust, you can optionally compile code based on what features are enabled.
Nice.
So you're almost like feature flagging your library at compile time.
That's a cool idea.
Yeah, it's kind of magic. So in this case, we're saying we want to use request version 0.11 or 0.11, and we also need any JSON capabilities to come out of the box with this, which Rust will handle. Yeah, very simple.
Excellent. So it sounds like that's done.
Yeah. So you can see all of the compile lines up
I see
here.
what you mean now about building your own HTTP client, right? I mean, obviously you're waiting on all of that, but then it's compiling all of these different programs to allow you to actually do it.
Yeah.
So if I
obviously request does a lot more than.
We're now good.
Yeah. So you've not actually changed any of the code yet, so it doesn't need to rebuild anything. And Rust will do incremental builds as well, so it will only ever build what has been changed.
Nice.
So build times get a little bit faster.
Excellent. So now we just need to look at using it, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So
we can use the docs, or I can kind of walk you through it.
Walk me through it. It's the whole purpose of this, isn't it?
Yeah. So let's create a new function.
Awesome. We'll come back to that. Now, would you put it above or below the main? Is there a specific place you would
below?
Put this? Cool.
I would normally put it below.
Yep.
I want my entry point right near the top.
Yeah.
So we'll do fn to start a function. The name of the function, which is normally snake cased, so underscores in between words, and let's just call it get repos. Yep, you got it. We need to pass the name or the handle through, so we can add a parameter to the function, just called handle.
Do we need to type?
And just like you type in a variable. Yep, exactly the same thing.
Beforehand, yeah.
But you do it just like a variable. No, you do it after. Sorry. Yeah, so you do a colon and then the type, which is string. Yeah, so it's just like a variable. That's consistent throughout the entire language.
Nice.
So that's our function.
So
why don't we just call this function? Let's call this function from main. Just to make sure that things are working as we're working working through.
I'm assuming that's because it's
Yeah, so that'll be because it's the Rust extension has like blueprinted the function, essentially the function signature.
okay.
You just need to remove that and just type handle. Yep,
Cool.
perfect. So that will compile and run. Handle is a string. We've type hinted it correctly. It will
Perfect.
tell you that it's unused, but it's compiling.
Yep.
So with request, we need to import some stuff at the top of the file. And what we're going to import is the HTTP client, as well as no, I think that's actually it. We just need the HTTP client. So just like before, we can say request. The sub namespace is blocking. It has there's two clients. There's a synchronous one or like a process blocking one, and there's also an asynchronous one.
Yep.
We don't need the asynchronous one right now, so we'll go with the blocking. The struct is called client with a capital C.
It's blocking.
Yep, that's right. Yeah, if you put a semicolon at the end, it should be fine. What is it moaning about? Couldn't find blocking. Let me just double check because we might need to enable another feature in the cargo file. Yeah, we do. Sorry, this is my bad. So in the cargo.toml,
Yep.
in the features array, we also need to add another string called blocking. And this is what I was talking about earlier with like the incremental or feature flagging features at compile time.
It's building that.
Yeah, so back in main.rs, yeah, it's building at the bottom. In a second, that'll be happy again. There you go.
Cool. A
Cool.
blocking client.
Yeah. So let's create a client. I'll see if you can figure this out.
Ooh, this will be fun.
So we know it's called client with a capital C.
Hmm.
Yep, good guess. So Rust doesn't have new. You can't say new client like you can in PHP or JavaScript.
Okay.
Instead, you either call static methods or struct methods, or you call instance methods. So the two semicolons are fine. It's like calling a static method on a class in PHP.
Yep.
In this case, we actually want to call the new function. So you can just type new, invoke it just like a function, and whack a semicolon at the end.
And obviously,
And with
it
any
does need to
luck,
be mutable, right?
it actually doesn't. No.
Perfect. Even easier.
The reason we're not going to be mutating the client at all, it's almost like a builder object.
Okay. So that's the difference between like the client, for example, and args. Is these are passed in and won't change once the program started, whereas this can be modified.
Yeah, it's not exactly modified. It's client is just a
Built.
builder. So you
Okay.
call a method on it, and it will return. It won't return a mutable reference or anything like that. So it doesn't need to be mutable in the first place.
Yep. Cool.
Cool. So I said it was a builder object, so now we're going to build something with it. So let's make a new variable called response. And we're going to set the value of this variable to client dot, and the API is a get request, I believe.
Yep.
So we can do dot get, and we need to pass it the string or the URL that we're trying to make a request to. Oh, what was that?
Copied a lot of other stuff then, didn't it? Okay, so let's go grab this. There we go. So what we can do, as you said before, I suppose, will this...
Not quite.
Damn it, I thought it was close.
The reason this won't work is because print line is you're fairly close. Print line is specifically designed to format.
Okay.
The get method is just expecting a string.
Yep. So do I need
So
to
alongside
pass
the
anything
print
in
line macro, Rust also has a format macro. So you can do format exclamation mark, call that like a function. So you would just invoke that macro and just paste in exactly what you had a second ago. So that is going to format the string and return a brand new string.
Awesome.
Yeah. I think in newer versions of Rust, you can do it similar to PHP, where you put a variable name inside of the curly braces. But for habit's sake, we'll just follow the old school way of doing it.
Yeah, that works for me. Cool, and I'm
Cool.
guessing, would you return that response from here? Not the whole response, obviously. You probably want to get a portion of the response to then assign get repos to. That's my assumption here.
So
right?
response isn't actually going to be a response yet.
Okay.
So like I said, it's a builder object.
Yep.
So at the minute we're just building the request, and we actually need to send the request still. And we can do that just by chaining on a .send at the end of our builder. Yeah, just like that. For now, let's just use our debug macro and see what we get back from the API.
Let's do it.
So we can just do a dbg.
Oh, it's apparently building. Ah, it's because now I'm actually using them, right?
Exactly,
here we go. So we've got a path, we've got a response for a URL, a status, we've got headers.
Yep. Our status is 403. Now, I believe the reason it's a 403
no user agent maybe?
is we haven't got a user agent. Yeah, I think GitHub API requires a user agent.
So, if
Let's
I
see
wanted,
if you can
can
figure
I
out how
put
to
that
set
down
a
on the
header.
next line? Is that a standard way to do this? To
Yep,
format?
that's how I'd do it, yeah. Yep.
Oh, wait.
What you actually want to do is, yeah, so it's not as fluent as and nice to look at.
Okay.
You
Headers?
actually need to use the header. Yeah.
Okay.
Header
Header
method.
or headers?
Header, just singular.
It takes 2 arguments as strings.
Yep, that's right, yeah.
$200, so we got something. Hey, look at me.
Yeah.
Man, I know what I'm doing.
if you scroll down a little bit.
Okay, my bad.
Yeah,
that's literally all I got.
Oh right, yeah, sorry. Okay, so it's not dumping
okay.
out the actual.
No.
Yeah. So we have an option type, which is a sum and none.
Yep.
Rust also has a result type, which is either an OK or an error.
So
there's no
is this where we're going to look at doing a
concept.
match again?
Exactly, yeah. That's exactly what we're going to do.
What we want to do is match this. Would this be the right way to do it? Match.
I would actually.
Or would you match after you've done that?
Yeah, I would match it after in this case.
So for Just
Yeah,
have a
exactly.
look. So, or match response.
Not quite.
Oh, I'm just
Yeah,
failing it.
response
I'm
is
a bit
exactly what you
rusty.
want.
So,
Oops. There's a little bit of lag, I think, on the stream.
yeah, sorry about that.
So match response. And just like we did before, we're actually just going to open the curly braces.
Okay. So,
And instead of matching against a sum or a none, we're going to match against an OK. And just like we did with the sum, we want to grab the value that's inside of the OK.
so we would do like D
And you
for
can just
data or
return it.
something.
Yep, that works, yeah.
And is it error or is it?
The second value is going to be ERR, so error or error. I don't know how you want to say it.
Yeah. And we probably want to do the same sort of
um,
thing here, right? As we did before.
exactly, yeah. You want to print a line, say something went wrong, and then exit.
Cool. So here we can go.
Yeah, perfect.
So it's complaining about that.
Yeah, the reason it's complaining about that is because the ERR type or the error type actually holds a value as well.
Okay.
We don't really care about the value, so you can do a parentheses and just do an underscore. So just normal brackets and then an underscore.
Like that.
Not quite. So, not curly
inside.
braces. It'll be like, yeah, you'd put the underscore inside, but Rust will just discard that.
Okay,
It
so
won't try
yeah,
to do
I get
anything
you.
with it.
So it's like with Go when you're doing
Yeah, exactly.
like that, right?
Yeah,
So you're saying I'm gonna get something
that's
back, but I
exactly
don't
it.
care about it. Dispose of that.
Yeah,
Cool.
exactly. Yeah. So we're just matching against it. We're not actually storing the unwrapped value anywhere.
Cool. So what we can do is there we go.
Yeah. So let's do that. Let's see what comes out of that.
So what we are getting is
Basically the same thing.
the same thing. Were we expecting that?
Yeah, the only difference is now. Yeah, that's exactly what we're
Cool.
expecting because we've just unwrapped it from the result.
Yep.
So it's no longer an OK response, it's just a response.
Ah, I see. Yep.
Cool. So we've got the response, we've got hold of that. We now need to get the JSON that was returned from the server. Now, I wonder if you can maybe figure this out.
Or body.
I think body does work, but in this case, there's a JSON method.
Ooh. Let's
And
go
now if you look
complain.
at the error,
Type annotation needed.
yeah, so the JSON method is a generic method. So it's actually expecting us to say, I want you to pass, or I want you to give me the JSON from the response.
Yep.
But with that JSON, I want you to marshal it, which is very common in Go, JSON marshalling. I basically want you to take the JSON from that response and transform it into some type.
Okay. And
So
how will I do this?
we're going to need another library.
Okay.
So in your cargo.json, yep, there's a library called, I say serde, but I don't know if this is right. It's SERDE.
Looks
We'll
like
say
surd to
equals,
me.
yep, and we'll open curly braces, just like we did for the one above. We'll do version equals 1.0.
Yep.
And we'll also add a features array. And in that array, we will do derive, so DERIVE. Yeah, just like that. And we also need one more just underneath another dependency. So
Yep.
on a new line, you can do serde underscore JSON. And you can do an equals 1.0 for this. We don't need to tell it anything extra. We can just give it the
Excellent.
version.
I've fetched those and built them already, so that's nice.
Yeah,
So I
cool.
guess I need to pull something in now, right?
Yes, you need to use serde, and we're going to be looking for the deserialize. Yep, that top one there.
Okay. Yep.
And now, like I was saying before, when we call the JSON method, we're actually telling the request library to transform that JSON into a structure of our own type.
Yep.
The best way to do that is to use a struct or a structure.
Yep.
So just above the get repos function, we can define a structure. So you're going to say struct and then the name of the struct, which is normally in Pascal case. So you can probably call it repository because that's what we're going to be getting back from the API with a capital R. Yep. Some curly braces. You don't need the semicolon. And we're going to add some fields to the struct. So just like properties on a class, we add some fields.
Cool. So
Just
for
like a
that, we probably
variable.
want to look at the API and see what it's giving us.
Yep.
So if we go for a minimum of like the full name for it.
Yep.
Oh, I've got a spinning wheel going on. What's going on? No, don't do that to me. A spinning wheel, and we'll get like the owner name as well. Might be kind of pointless, but
Yeah, I think maybe why don't we go for name and URL instead?
yep, let's do that.
So you define these just like a variable, just without the let keyword. So it'll be the name of the variable, colon, and then the type. So it'll be a string, comma at the end, yep, and then the same for the URL.
Cool.
Now, by default, this struct has nothing to do with our JSON. Serde doesn't know how to interact with it. It doesn't know what it looks like.
Yep.
So at the very top of the struct on the line just before, we're going to use something that looks very similar to PHP attributes.
Okay.
So we're going to start with a hash, two square brackets,
Oh, square brackets.
square
Sorry.
brackets. Yeah, no,
Yep.
all good. And you can just type deserialize. So you know that's what we imported further up.
Okay.
If you hover over, it's going to tell you you've done something wrong, and I think it's going to say you need a debug in there as well. If you scroll down a little bit inside of that pop-up. Expected attribute. Oh, sorry, my bad. We've completely missed something.
Okay.
So inside of these square brackets, we
Yeah.
need to actually wrap this in a call to a function called derive. So you would do derive. Oh, it's added the hash for you. Yeah, we'll go with that. And put deserialize in there.
Cool.
This is another type of macro. So Rust has those like function-like macros.
Yep.
It also has derive macros, and all a derive macro does is it operates on like a struct or an enum, and it can modify the behavior of that struct or enum at compile time. So it can add methods, it can interact with properties and stuff like that.
Cool.
So it's just another type of macro. We can just think of it like that to keep it simple.
Nice.
So we've created our structure now. All we care about is the name and the URL. So in the
Yep.
JSON method further down, we
Down
know
here, yeah.
this is generic. Yep, we know this is generic. So you were kind of close earlier with the square brackets, but instead of putting the square brackets at the end, you actually do them before the parentheses. So it looks kind of weird. So just after
Do
the
you want to
word,
take over to show me that bit so I know what we're talking about?
yeah, sure. So
Show how tuple works. Here we go.
yeah, here we go. I'm
Okay.
typing.
Look, hands
So
free. That's how good
I
I am
think
at Rust.
earlier. Oh, I have my keyboard disabled. Let's turn my keyboard on. I think earlier you put something here,
Yes.
which is very close. So we do use angled brackets. But what we're actually going to do is just after JSON, do two colons.
Okay.
Then we're going to put our square brackets.
Yep.
Sorry, our angled brackets, not our square brackets, our angled brackets. And like I said, JSON is generic, and we can see that it needs a type T.
Yep.
Rust is kind of handy. It says help. Consider specifying the type argument in the function call using two colons. Oh, it's disappeared. Angled brackets and T, which is our type.
Yeah.
So using that, we can kind of assume that we need to put our, not deserialize, our repository in here.
But aren't we going to get a list of repositories?
We are, yeah.
Okay.
So request will see that or I guess CERD really,
Yeah.
the response from the API is an array of objects. So it will go, cool, I know how to handle arrays. I'll automatically give you a vector of repositories or an array of repositories because it intelligently knows how to handle that.
Yeah.
We can run this
Let's give it a
and
go.
see what we get back. Yeah, we'll give it a go. Let
Moment
me
of truth.
disable my mouse. Yeah. Let it compile CERD quickly. If you give it a minute, it's having a go at us.
Debug is not implemented for repository. Drive debug.
Yeah, that's exactly what we need to do. We need to derive debug.
So can we derive more than one thing?
Yep, so it's just a comma separated list. Instead of doing it like this, you've got the right idea almost. You can actually just pass multiple things through to deserialize, or sorry, to derive.
Oh, that's nice. Okay.
So you just put debug in there. Debug comes with Rust. It basically reflects the struct, and it will give you like a pretty printed version of the struct with the properties and the values, like print r or var dump.
Yeah.
So we'll try and run this again.
Ooh.
Invalid type map expected a string. Interesting. So what is happening here? Let's go back to
here.
Yeah, so it's on the JSON parsing. So if I take over quickly.
Yep. Hands free again. Love this part. That's how I should do all my coding.
You were actually right earlier, so I've just remembered. I don't think the API strictly returns just a It might do. I don't think it does return just an array of objects. In this case, we do actually need to tell the JSON or CERD that we're expecting a vec. Now, this is a low-level language, just like Go. I know you're familiar with Go, so we'll compare to Go. In Go, you have arrays and slices.
Yep.
In Rust, you have a very similar thing. You have fixed length arrays, which are always fixed length. You can't change the length of them. You then have slices of those arrays, and then you have more complex types like vec, which is a dynamically sized array
Okay.
or a contiguous growable array type.
Ooh.
If you want to get fancy, it's a
Yep.
dynamic array. That's all it is.
Okay.
So
It's,
yeah,
it's a
we're now
PHP array,
telling,
basically, right?
yeah, it's a PHP array, a JavaScript array. Um, the only difference being you can call methods on it, unlike PHP. It's probably more like a collection.
Okay.
Um,
Because generic, you can do more with the type.
yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I'll give you the hands back.
Excellent. So
You can try and run this again.
let's try again. We got him. Look at
There we
that.
go.
It's almost like I knew what I was
So
doing.
we've got all of my repositories, most of them probably abandoned or unmaintained. um,
That might be out of scope for this one.
yeah, we'll leave that for now. Um, but you can see we've got all the repositories. It's in a vec or what looks like an array. It's also wrapped in an OK type.
Yep.
So just like we did before, we can match against this. So
So we
perhaps,
kind of want to pull this out and
yeah, maybe do it in a variable.
um, so then we want to match against that.
Yep.
I do need that on the end, don't I? Yeah.
Yep. It's just having a go at you because you haven't given it all of the cases to match against.
I can handle that for now. And then obviously if we error,
Yep.
we don't care about what we're getting. All we want to do is print line and say I don't know, failed
So
to
whatever you like. Pass. Failed to pass response, maybe. And then we can exit. You know, if this was a real tool, you'd probably want to do a error handling a little bit better.
yeah.
So you could break the error down a little bit more and match against the actual specific type of error.
Yep.
But for now, this is good enough for us. So why don't we return found repos?
And is this how you would declare your variables all the time? It's always going to be this format.
Yeah. So variables and functions are snake case or words split by underscores.
Yeah.
Structures, enums, any type is going to be Pascal case. So capital letters at the start of words, no underscores or anything like that.
Would I add a return type on this or not?
Yes,
Do
we need
return
to add a
types?
return type. Yeah, we need to do that.
I'm assuming
That
is
is
wrong.
Yeah, so arrows are used instead of colons. And we're not just returning a vec, we're returning a vec of something.
So I'm guessing it's like that.
Yeah, perfect.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I'm seeing a lot of similarities
So this
between the other
was
languages I've used.
Yeah, I think the Rust team took a lot of inspiration from other languages. Understandably, you know, if those languages are popular and they're proven, why wouldn't you?
Exactly. So now I have got some repos, so I can say let repos be that.
Yeah. Probably a committable stage again, I'd
Yeah,
say.
I'd definitely say so.
It seemed like we did a lot, but really we were just covering
Yeah.
like fine details.
So we were calling GitHub API and Marshall response into struct.
Yeah, perfect. Cool. So we'll step back a little bit from
Yep.
generics and handling errors and stuff like that, and we'll actually just loop over all of our repos and try and print them out into the terminal.
Okay.
So repos is a vec which on its own is iterable. You have that concept in PHP as well of an iterable type.
Yep.
It's really just a type that you can loop over. Now in Rust, the main looping structure is a for in loop.
Okay.
So in our
So
case, we could say, yep, you've got it. No semicolon needed at the end.
sweet.
If you hover over repo, you'll be able to see what it is. You can see it's a repository.
Yep. So for this, I can go. Is that going to cause an error? Hopefully not.
No, that should be fine. Cool. Let's try and compile this. Let's see what happens.
Moment of truth. There we go. Got a nice list.
Yep. I think we could probably make the names clickable as links.
Oh, they are by default in my terminal, but obviously other terminals maybe not.
Yeah, okay, that's fine. We can leave it as it is for now.
Yeah.
We'll say that it works on your machine.
So yeah, exactly. The only problem is we're getting the URL from the API.
Yeah, so if you scroll down a little bit, I think there's an HTML underscore URL.
That one. So what we
Yeah,
want on here is that instead.
yep, that will work.
But obviously that's not very readable.
No, so CERD does have a way of similar to JSON Marshall in Golang.
Yeah.
There is a way of saying pull the value for this field from a particular key in the JSON.
Okay.
That is possible, and this kind of comes back to the derive macros or the macros that I were on about earlier.
So would we want to be doing it?
It's up to you. I mean, the simplest way is just to keep the keys the same.
Yeah, but I mean that's what I'm learning. I'm not trying to build something perfect right now. I think it's something useful for if I want to get more into Rust, definitely. But
Yeah. Okay.
considering I've not
It's up to
really
you. Do
written
you?
anything in Rust before, to me this
Yeah.
is
No.
impressive.
Definitely. Yeah. No. You've done well to keep up so far because we have covered quite a bit.
Well, I mean it's a little bit like when you taught me how to use filament on by reading the docs out to me.
Yeah. Except this time I'm the Rust docs.
Yeah. So
Um. Yeah. I mean we've
nice.
built the terminal
Yeah.
terminal app. I think I don't
So
know how long have we got left.
probably got about 20-25 minutes.
Okay, shall we dig into Rust's module system a little bit then?
Yeah.
I think that
Let's do it.
everything at the minute is just written in our main.rs file.
Yeah. What I'll do is I will commit this.
Oh yeah, good shout.
I'll push all that up so other people can see it.
Nice. Yeah, so at the minute we're writing everything in main.rs,
Yep.
which for something this small is fine. Like it would work fine. You'd maintain it fine probably. But for the sake of learning, we'll extract out the get repos and the repository struct. We'll extract those out into a module.
Okay.
Now, the
I'm
way
ready.
this works, the first step is to create a new file in our source directory. Call it whatever you want. I would probably call it like API.rs or something like that.
Works for me.
Let's copy and paste the get repos and the struct over to our new file. Perfect.
I'm assuming I need to
Couple of
move some
things.
use statements over.
Yep, exactly. I think we also need the exit one as well.
Yeah, we probably do, don't we? So I'll copy that and remove what I don't need.
Yep.
Is there like an order of precedence for...
No, it doesn't really matter, to be honest.
Okay. Like Go,
I
the
think that's
standard is to like, if it's a standard library, then it's first, and then it's like pulled in libraries next.
yeah. I imagine you can probably do that with like a formatter.
Yeah.
There's no real strict rule on it. Cool. So we've got our new file. Back in main RS, we actually need to tell Rust where our module
I
is.
need to
Yeah, we can
remove this
remove all of
stuff
this
now.
as well. Yeah.
So, I'll take a
So get
stab. Um, GitHub
you have got the right idea.
API. No,
You're very close. So
cool.
if I let's take control again here quickly.
Yeah.
So in this case, we're saying we want to use these third-party modules or these third-party packages. But relative to our current project, the Rust compiler is going to look inside of our source directory and say, well, what files can I see here?
Yeah.
I can see API. It doesn't know that that's a module. That could be a separate binary application for all it cares. You can have multiple targets and multiple libraries in the same project.
Yep.
So what we actually need to do at the very top is say mod API. Nice.
Cool.
This is going to tell Rust that the API file or the API file in our directory is a module.
Yep.
And then down here, you are exactly right. You can say API get repos.
And then I assume I've also got to API down the bottom as well. Ooh.
Whereabouts? Down here?
Yeah.
Not quite. So get repos is a private function.
Okay. Yep.
Everything in Rust is private or immutable by default. So over in our API, I've gone too high. Over in our API, we actually need to make this a public function.
That's simple.
Yeah, so it's just like saying public function on a class.
Yeah.
But instead, we're saying this is a public module function. So this is working.
Excellent.
API repository, however, is not.
Is this where it's going to be like Go, where it needs to be capitalized?
No.
Okay.
I absolutely hate that in Go. The fact that it has to be capitalized and like the casing determines publicity is weird.
It reminds me of like what you used to do in old PHP days with underscores for private.
Yeah. So we've made our function public. You can probably guess what we need to do to make these fields public.
Put pub in front of the ones that you want public.
Yeah, exactly.
Hey,
Like that.
it's almost like this was written by a British guy.
Pub. Okay, so we've got another error. Um,
Okay.
we've got repos. This function is public, but now API repository is private. It'll be the same thing here. It'll be saying you've got a public function, but you're exposing a private type.
Yep. So the
I think if I try and scroll down, yeah, here we go. API repository declared as private. You
yep.
can't leak a private type. So
Cool.
exactly the same thing. We need to say repository is a public type.
Awesome.
Everything has to be pub
Yep.
if you want to expose it. If we were just like using get repos to output the repository names and everything like that, we wouldn't have
Yeah.
to make it public.
So do we still need to set the name and HTML URL as public, even though the whole struct is public?
Yeah,
Cool.
yeah, that's
So it's
exactly it.
still got like, I suppose from PHP land, which is where I spend a lot of my time, it's got that class scope still, even though it is accessible.
Yeah, exactly.
Cool.
Yeah, I mean, without the pub, it's the equivalent of saying public string name
Yeah.
or public string HTML URL. Um, just the opposite way. In PHP, everything is public by default, I believe, even to this day.
Like if you just do a class
Whereas,
of a function without any scope declaration, then I believe it is just public.
exactly, yeah. So in Rust, it's the opposite. Everything's private by default. You have to opt into publicity or making it visible.
Nice.
All comes down to safety.
Amazing.
Yeah.
So the only thing that I've noticed that we definitely need to do is we don't need that anymore.
Sorry, I stole your mouse there again.
That's all right.
Yeah, no, we don't need that anymore.
Yeah.
We can probably run this in the terminal and it will work exactly the same.
Bang.
There we go.
Oh, autocomplete has remembered your username for me. Makes it easier. Nice. That's really cool. I mean,
Yeah.
that's pretty fast as well.
Yeah, we can maybe make it a little bit faster. So if you do cargo run again, and just before the double hyphens, do dash dash release, followed by the two hyphens and the username. So Rust is then going to build a very optimized version of the program and execute that instead.
Nice.
It will do the same for the libraries. It will build a release version of all the libraries, super optimized.
So just it's compiling the program at this point, right? It's going, okay, I'm going to create
Yeah,
a releasable application.
yeah, exactly.
Obviously, that takes however long it takes, depending on how many third-party libraries and how many modules you've built yourself.
Yeah, exactly that. So you can probably
Bang.
time that, and it might be a little bit faster.
So has that actually built it now, or is it an executable, or do I need to do something separate for that?
So in the target folder, you go. What? That's
Okay,
100
because it's already been
milliseconds.
built now.
Yeah, exactly. It's 100 milliseconds faster though, I think, than the debug build,
Yeah.
give or take.
So that was it compiling. 0.04 system time and user time. About the same.
I think if you look at the number at the end though, the
Total, isn't it?
actual
It's about the total.
total,
That's
yeah,
the most
yeah.
important part.
You look at the total.
0.743 and 0.673. Yeah, roughly
Near
about 100
enough.
milliseconds faster.
Yeah, so that's not bad considering it's not a heavy
Yeah,
program by
it's
any
making a
means.
network call to an external network as well, right? It's
Yeah,
Rust is one of those languages where it's aimed at low level usage. You can use it for a lot
exactly.
of things, like you can with
Yeah,
C, with C++. You could build a website with C or C++ if you really wanted to, but it's not optimized for that.
Yeah, definitely.
So
Yeah, no, you're bang on.
cool.
Yeah, I think you wanted to take a look at the release binary, I think.
Yeah. So
So
in
in the target folder, there's a release, and then that is the binary.
that one there. So for me to run that, I would have to target release.
That's the one.
Bam. Um,
And you can get rid of the double hyphens now, yeah,
yeah, because now it's acting like a CLI program, right?
exactly.
Done. 0.5. It's even faster when it's not trying to do the
Yep.
process.
Yeah, you
Anyone
haven't got
interested,
cargo
that
stuff on
is a
top.
quick shortcut. So that one can go. But if you're on a Unix-based system, if you want to prefix, sorry, append any command to a command with a command you've just ran, you can double exclamation mark for quick and easy usage. But obviously, that's always going to depend on network speed, right?
Yeah, there's loads of factors, but
Yeah,
right now on that particular run, it was like 200 milliseconds faster
yeah.
than the
And I
debug
think
run.
there's probably about 50. I think it limits to 50 on pagination, maybe less.
25, I think, on the first
It
page.
could be. Um,
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's 25.
it might be. Uh, rest repositories. It's gonna say per page 30 by default. Default is
Oh, 30.
30. You can
Yeah,
pass a max of 100. So,
yeah. So you could
yeah,
you could change that in the URL. You could add a
yeah.
query parameter.
So let's say we wanted to do that instead.
So that'll be in get repos.
You could just change it like that.
Yep.
And then we rebuild it because I'm making a slight change to the URI. And now we're getting 100.
Yeah.
You, if you're anything like me, you probably haven't got anywhere near all of your repos in 100.
Yeah, there's definitely some missing. Well, there's a lot of private ones and
Yeah.
archived ones and stuff, but yeah.
But that CLI and Rust.
Yeah, that's Rust. I mean, that's a hand rolled CLI. There's no frameworks or
Yeah.
anything.
And that, I mean,
Other
yeah,
than
you could
the
do lots with formatting, right? I mean, you could look at if I ran this in like terminal, for example, if I just bring that over and we just go to GitHub me GitHub CLI Rust, and if we
so you can try and remember it now.
there we go. Still got autocomplete. So I can't click on these here, obviously.
Yeah.
So there's a lot I could do with like formatting if I wanted to go that extra step. But as a quick utility tool,
Yeah.
I
It
don't know
works.
what
It's
your
functional.
utility I'd really be solving here, but
Maybe you just want a quick list of all of my repos.
I might do. Anybody
You know,
might do. You might be like, okay, so I don't know. Let's get Nuno. This is where I spelled his name wrong. No, I got it right.
100 is clearly not enough.
Yeah, no, definitely not. Nice.
Cool. I think we're
This is where I
almost
get
out of
Taylor's
time as
name
well.
wrong all the time. Now, here we go. I did get his name right. So obviously Taylor's most of his are going to be under the Illuminate domain. So the only downside with something like this is, I can't do that for a user, can I? Oh no, it works.
Yeah, I think it
It
does. Yeah, I think
shortcuts. Perfect.
yeah, it must handle organizations for you.
Yeah, it does. That's amazing. Well chuffed. That actually works in Rust. And that wasn't as when you see people talk about Rust and they're like, oh, WebAssembly this, Linux kernel that, or I'm building this really low level something using Rust. It's like, oh, you kind of shiver. You're like, oh, you know,
Yeah,
it's been a while since I looked at C or assembly or anything along that line, that low level, because I've been spending a lot of time in PHP or Golang, which is to me Golang's a little bit more kind of accessible than stuff like Rust because it feels a lot more playful. I don't know whether that's from the branding, from it's when it first came out. It was like, oh, look, a cute gopher. That's gonna be really easy. It's come from Google. How hard can it be? Um,
yeah,
that psychological aspect to it. It could be that, but
yeah. No, I think
yeah,
you're right. A lot of people get scared by generics, and
yeah,
I mean, Go has generics now, so
yeah,
it's a little bit different. But previously, yeah, Rust has a very complex generic model, macros and proc macros, stuff like that. There's loads of things in Rust that are scary, and to be honest, I don't fully understand myself. Um, just like I don't understand everything in PHP.
yeah.
Um,
Exactly. It's a big language, and because it's
yeah,
a lower level language, there's a lot more that can go wrong.
yeah, definitely. But I think you did very well. You picked it up quite well.
Well, I had
Um,
looked at the syntax before, and I think I did a hello world like a few
yeah,
months ago just to play with it, just like, oh, what's this Rust about then? I did it, and I was like, I'm going back to Golang.
yeah, fair enough. Like,
It's easier for me to look at, but no, this is
yeah. So, like in
you get
terms
used
of
to it.
yeah, how verbose it is, it's like between Go and C++. plus plus.
Yeah, I'm quite a fan of verbose code, personally. I mean,
Yeah,
it's one of the things that put me off Python mostly was just it didn't feel verbose enough.
yeah, fair
PHP, I could
enough.
make it as verbose as I liked, and Golang they recommend don't be so verbose, and if you're gonna do like we have here, um, to me personally, I'd do that.
Yeah.
Um, I mean,
Well,
that's
see,
what I'd
personally,
personally do.
I wouldn't purely because the variable is describing the match is being assigned to a variable that describes what the data is.
Yeah, contextually, it makes a lot of sense just to use R here because it's already being assigned.
Yeah, I think the only time I wouldn't do that and I would give it like a descriptive name is if I was using it inside of the block.
Yeah.
If I
So
was to
could you
use it
not
inside of the
return
block,
from there? Could you not early return like you can in other languages?
yep, you can do that. Yeah.
Cool. Any other
Um,
hints and tricks I could do?
Even better, you can omit the return completely from at the end.
Yeah.
If you remove that and remove the semicolon at the end, Rust will implicitly return.
Nice.
So if the
So without the semicolon, it's just seeing it as
a return,
yeah. I'm not following any other process after this. This is the last.
yeah, exactly.
Nice. So what I saw also was I could really be filthy and get my Laravel on.
Yeah, I mean nothing wrong with that.
This is how I typically do it.
Yeah, I mean try and compile that actually.
Yeah,
I'm pretty sure it does work.
there's the next test. Okay, so cargo run and release. I probably don't need to do the release. No, that worked.
There you go. It does work. In some cases, like those builder objects won't work like that because of you might have a new method which doesn't
Yeah,
return what you're expecting it to return.
yeah.
But generally speaking, it is all right.
Use with caution, basically, right? It might.
Yeah,
Library authors do it their specific way.
yeah. Um, I guess one thing we could look at actually before we finish up in
Yep,
the terminal, if you run cargo clippy,
yep. Just on its
yep,
own.
just like that. Yep, just like that. Now, Clippy is Cargo's best friend.
Okay.
Um, oh, no, our program's actually all right. There's no suggestions.
Is that because we
What?
did
What?
the release dash with a release?
No, I think we've actually just fixed everything up ourselves without
Oh,
even running Clippy. Maybe a good example is if you add in a variable that doesn't get used. So maybe at the top of the function, just do like let foo equal bar as a string. Yeah. And let's run Clippy again. So what Rust is actually like statically analyzing your program,
yeah.
much like PHP Stan or Psalm would.
Okay.
But it's actually giving you ways to improve your code.
Okay. So prefix with an underscore. That's your first option.
Yep. So Rust will say that's fine. I don't need to optimize that out. You're storing the value, but you know you're not using it.
Cool.
Um, there are some other things that it would pick up in a more complex program.
Yeah.
It can tell you if your generic parameters are useless.
Yep.
Um,
So now, I'm not using the debugger. Can I remove that?
yeah, you can do. Yeah,
It's not costing anything, but it's one of those kind of cleanup operations in my mind, like a DD or a var dump. Would I remove that, or would I want to keep that in there so that the next time I came and if I needed to debug it,
yeah.
it'd already be
I
there.
I'd
You can,
always keep it in.
okay. It's not costing much,
Every
right?
There is no cost. Yeah, there's
Yeah.
absolutely zero cost. Um, yeah, zero overhead. I would keep it in, just like you say. If you come back to that in a week's time and you try to debug it with the dbg or debug macro, it's not going to work. It's going to
Yeah.
blow up.
It's gonna fail. I'm like, oh yeah, I need to add debug when in fact I could have just left it and it's not increased
Yeah,
the size of my application or the performance of the application in any way.
yeah. Essentially, every struct or enum that I ever write in a Rust program has debug on it,
Yeah.
just as a default. Um, just so that option is there.
So I mean we didn't even use the env file, so I can remove that now.
Yeah, there was no need.
Remove them both.
Yeah.
And that means in git ignore I don't actually need that. So it can just be everything added from there.
How much time have we got left?
Probably just about it, to be honest. I'm trying to make
Cool.
sure I don't go downstairs too late and see my daughter for a bit today.
Yeah, no worries. Yeah. I think we did pretty well for a Rust beginner who,
That was fun. I
yeah,
mean, you do some Rust stuff on YouTube as well, don't you?
I've done a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah, you stream, I think, a wider variety than what I do. Um, I've done Go, PHP, and now Rust, but I think you've done that as well. Oh, that's a good question actually from Michael. How do you write tests for this sort of stuff?
So in request case, there are ways to mock the request. There are ways to do it. It's not as clean as Laravel by any means.
Yeah,
Um, we can write a quick example test if you really
yeah.
want.
How about we do a test to make sure that we're passing a argument? Is that something that
That
we could do?
is that's
As
a
in,
little bit harder because that's
okay,
actually that we're relying on something from the environment.
okay. What's going to be
Okay,
the
so
easiest test for us to do?
probably, well, we can just assert something is true, just an example to show how a
Cool.
test is written.
Yep.
Let's just do that. So over in source main.rs, we write, well, we can, we don't have to, but in most cases, you write your tests alongside your application code or your library code.
Okay.
So we have to create a module, and this is going to be an inline module. So if I quickly take over.
Yeah.
So up here we had mod API,
Yep.
and we've got the semicolon. So we're saying this is the end of the statement. Rust is going to look at our source folder and see the API file,
Yep.
and it will say that's what we're going to use as the source of the module. But what we can actually do is create a mod called tests just at the end of the file and give it a curly brace.
Yep.
And this is going to create like an inline module. We can define the module code right next to the module declaration or definition.
Nice.
Let's create a function example, maybe. This doesn't need to be public. That doesn't really matter. All we need to do for the function, at least, is add an attribute called test.
Oh, nice. It's popped up saying run test already.
We can run the test from here,
Yeah.
or we can decorate the module itself and say config test.
Okay.
Config is like a cargo thing.
Yeah.
So it's specific to cargo in this case. We're telling cargo that this module should be used as our test module.
Okay. So what would that just when you compile your program, it just wouldn't be included?
Yeah,
Is that
exactly.
cool? But if you didn't
Yeah,
add that, you just have an empty module.
yeah. So if you go back to the terminal, I'll let you run this bit of code. Back to the terminal. If you run cargo test, this is just like running PHP unit or pest. It's going to execute all of the tests. You can see it found one test.
Tests example. Okay.
Okay. We didn't make any
Yeah.
assertions, so it's always going to be okay.
Yeah.
If we go back to the code real quick, though, we can make an assertion. So just inside of the example function, Rust has some macros that come out of the box for testing.
Yeah.
So there's one called assert underscore equal or EQ. And you can call that like a function. That's going to expect two arguments. It'll be the expected value and the actual value. So you can just do true, true. If you run that, you can see everything's fine.
Yep.
If you maybe assert true and false at equal, execute that, it's going to fail.
Burp.
The test output is all right. It's not like super clean
It's not PHP unit or
or
pest.
pest.
It's
It's literally showing you the panic.
yeah. But
It's
it's that
saying
level language, right? It's
yeah,
it's something you expect to have like a kernel panic or
yeah,
something.
yeah, super low level, like no try catch wrapped around it and pretty printing and stuff like that. It's just the raw assertion failed, left is not equal to right. Figure it out for yourself.
Cool. I'm going to make a new library called REST testing.
Rest. Nice.
Cool. No, that's pretty cool. I mean, obviously that's going to bug me. Even if it's just a true. I can't leave it on a red. I just can't. My OCD will kill me. Cool. So let me.
I think in Go you tend to put your test file next to the source file, right?
Yeah. Yeah, you do. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's kind of similar. You're just placing your tests in the same file as the source code.
Yeah. So in Golang, I'd do. I don't even think I've got anything local at the moment. Um, Oh, what's it called? What did I call it? I have to go find it. It's going to really bug me. Is it API problem? Did I write tests for that one? Did I need them? Here we go. So, I'll zoom in. So this is a really simple Go module that I created. Um, all it does is it's a struct, um, a way to create something nice for sending JSON error responses. That's all it is. Um, title, detail, status, code, and a meta, and it can be empty. Emit if empty. For a test, we've got a test API problem. We run a specific test. This is feeling very much like test looking at this. Um, Open up the callable. You go, okay, create a new problem, and this is what I want. And we just go, okay, if what we want doesn't equal what we're expecting, an error. I mean, there's more in-depth testing you can do with Go, obviously, than what this is, but this is how you would structure them in Go, for example, as a comparison. You've got your file, then your test file next to it, whereas I'd
Yeah.
like this. This just encapsulates things nicely because if you're adding something to the bottom of here like this, and it's like, okay, I'm gonna do something else. It's like you can see your test module
It's right
right
there in
there,
front of
and
you. Yeah.
it's kind of forcing you to go, don't forget. So
Yeah.
to me, that's kind of cool. Yeah, no commits. Awesome. Well,
Nice.
thanks very much, buddy. That was amazing.
No, thanks
Um,
for having me on again.
you, anytime if you want to come back again, feel free. And for anyone watching now or later, here is a link to the repo. Feel free to go have a look. GitHub, Just Steve King, GitHub, CLI Rust. That was really fun. Obviously,
Yeah, no, it was.
the code has been added. There we go. So thank you. And remember, in the description below, there's a link to Ryan's YouTube channel where he just streams himself. There's also a link to his Twitter. Make sure you give him a follow if you aren't already. And if you aren't, then where have you been, basically? Um, but thanks for joining me, Ryan, and thanks for everyone who's tuned in or anyone who will watch this. As usual, in the description below there is a Discord link. Feel free to join, have a chat, give me feedback about what you like, don't like about my streams, so I can kind of adjust it and make sure everyone's happy. And also in the description below there is a link to the pair programming tool I'm using, which was generously donated by Tuple. Tuple is absolutely amazing. Obviously, definitely built with Tailwind. Um, it's just a really nice pair programming tool that just works. The best one I've used like the VS Code live share. I've used the Code with Me on PHP Storm, and they always feel so buggy because they kind of bolted into something. Whereas this is a dedicated one. I can share my screen, just have a phone call, have a text chat, I believe, um, with Ryan, and we can just have a quick phone call, or we can jump into a screen share session, and he can draw on my screen. He can put big animated stamps and confetti and exactly. You do lots of cool stuff, and for a pair program, it's perfect. But this
Yeah,
isn't a promo.
definitely.
This is just a thank you, basically. I couldn't be doing this so well without this. Otherwise, me and Ryan would be probably about halfway back to where we should be in
Yeah.
getting this if we'd been relying on any other tool or him telling me what to do. So, thanks for coming. Thanks for joining me, Ryan.
No,
Um,
thank you.
have a good night, everyone, and hope to see you all again soon. Thanks very much. Have a good night.